Because Act II Scene 1 is 300 lines long, this video will only cover the action as far as Othello's entrance on line 170. Over the course of these lines, Shakespeare will build up a sense of tension and anticipation in the audience for Othello's safe arrival in Cyprus. Not only does he introduce a note of drama with the peril of the storm, but he also delays Othello's arrival on stage through the separation of the fleet, and exploits this to orchestrate the arrival of the main characters one after the other, in order to modulate the dynamics. It also gives Shakespeare the opportunity to shine the spotlight on Cassio, so that he can establish the characteristics that Iago will go on to exploit, as well as to highlight the stark differences between how both Cassio and Iago speak to and of women, and how Othello will address Desdemona when they are reunited. We have now left Venice behind for good, as the second act opens in Cyprus. Enter Montano, the current governor, and two gentlemen. The men are awaiting news of what has been happening out at sea, as a tempest rages on. At Montano's request for an update, the first gentleman responds that visibility is extremely poor, as it is a high-wrought flood, and he has been unable to detect even the sail of a ship twixt the heaven and the main, or between the sky and the sea. Montano conjures a dramatic image of the storm, characterising it as a battle between a personified wind and land, as he asserts that he has never experienced anything like it before. Methinks the wind does speak aloud at the land, a fuller blast ne'er shook our battlements. In fact, if it has had such a raging effect on the sea, he doubts there is a ship in existence that can bear the brunt of such mountainous waves without falling apart at the seams. If it hath ruffianed so upon the sea, what ribs of oak, when mountains melt on them, can hold the mortise? Indeed, the conditions are so bad that the second gentleman reports that they have caused a segregation, or scattering, of the Turkish fleet. Developing Montano's metaphor of a standoff between the wind and the land, he reports that the wind-created waves, rebuked by a steadfast shore which has sent them crashing back, have, in retaliation, thrown themselves up skywards, like some wild and monstrous seahorse, to such a distance that it seems as though even the two bright stars in the constellation of Ursa Major, the Great Bear, known as the guardians of the pole star, have been extinguished. For do but stand upon the banning shore, the chidden billow seems to pelt the clouds. The wind-shaked surge, with high and monstrous mane, seems to cast water on the burning bear and quench the guards of the ever-fixed pole. Because the Earth's axis points almost directly to the pole star, it appears not to move, while other stars, due to their positioning, appear to trace arcs of movement across the night sky. Because of its fixed position, you can always use this star to find north, and it was an important tool for navigation during Shakespeare's time. There's a suggestion that the storm is sufficiently ferocious for the ships to lose all sense of place and direction. A third gentleman enters with the good news that our wars are done. The desperate tempest hath so banged the Turks that their designment, or their plan for an attack, halts. There is also, however, the more worrying news that a noble ship of Venice hath seen a grievous wrack and sufferance on most part of their fleet. The ship is here put in, and Michael Cassio, lieutenant to the warlike Moor Othello, is come on shore, bearing the news that the Moor himself is still at sea, and is in full commission here for Cyprus. Montano happily receives the news that Othello is to replace him as governor, which is even more proof that he is well regarded and that Iago's antipathy towards him is not widely shared. I am glad on it, 'tis a worthy governor. Cassio, however, though he speaks of comfort touching the Turkish loss, yet he looks sadly and prays the Moor be safe, for they were parted with foul and violent tempest. It seems that they have all made the journey to Cyprus travelling in convoy in separate ships, and just because Cassio has made it safely, it doesn't automatically mean that the others will as well. Montano adds his own prayers for Othello's safety, remarking that he himself has served under him and that the man commands like a full or perfect soldier. He announces that they should make their way to the shore, as well to see the vessel that's come in as to throw out our eyes for brave Othello. They are, however, preempted by the entrance of Cassio, who shows his gratitude to the people of Cyprus for their good opinion of his master. "Thanks you the valiant of this warlike isle that so approve the more," and reveals his worry that he lost track of him during the storm. "Oh, let the heavens give him defence against the elements, for I have lost him on a dangerous sea." His bark, however, is stoutly timbered and his pilot a very expert and approved allowance. In other words, his ship is robustly made and its captain is highly skilled, so he professes to be confident, although not excessively so, that he will come safely ashore. His speech is interrupted by a shout from within, "A sail! A sail! A sail!" and a messenger enters, bearing the news that the townspeople, who have vacated the town to keep watch on the brow of the sea, have spotted a ship which has fired a gun salute to signal that it contains our friends at least. The second gentleman is dispatched to find out who it is who has arrived. The topic of conversation switches to Othello's personal life, as Montano asks Cassio if your general is wived. Cassio replies in the affirmative as he waxes lyrical about her virtues and her beauty. Most fortunately, he hath achieved a maid that paragons description and wild fame. In other words, he has married a lady whose attributes defy any attempts to describe them. She is one that excels the quirks of the blazoning pens, and in the essential vesture of creation does tire the ingener. Here Shakespeare is referring to a style of poetry called a blazon that was popular at the time. The poet would write a piece of verse which flattered his lady-love profusely by comparing her various physical features to precious jewels and heavenly bodies like the moon and the sun. Shakespeare famously wrote an antidote to what he felt was this type of insincere and saccharine hyperbole in his sonnet number 130, "My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun." Cassio, however, does not share Shakespeare's cynicism and is basically saying in his speech that even these poems would not be able to do Desdemona justice, going even further to assert that the perfection of her being is such that it has exhausted her creator, presumably God. It's fitting that Cassio now speaks in such extravagant and hyperbolic terms. Don't forget that Iago has already suggested that this elegant and courtly, albeit naive, young soldier is a bit of a ladies' man, in terms of his handsome appearance and charismatic demeanour, and Cassio has just proved this evaluation to be true. Remember also that Othello has already made it clear that he feels at a disadvantage that he is little blessed with the soft phrase of peace, at which Cassio will show himself to be adept. It is this such superficial and flowery chivalry, and Othello's sensitivity to his own perceived shortcomings, that Iago will go on to exploit in order to first ignite and then fan the flames of Othello's jealousy. The second gentleman returns to announce the arrival of one Iago ancient to the general. The fact that he has arrived ahead of time, Cassio says, swept away on a wave of hyperbole, is purely down to the fact that the tempests themselves, high seas and howling winds, the jagged rocks and the hidden sandbanks that lurk beneath the surface of the waves to ensnare unsuspecting ships, have gone against their natural tendencies to maim and kill in order to let go safely by the divine Desdemona. Montano is none the wiser as he questions, "What is she?" "She," clarifies Cassio, "is that I spake of, our great captain's captain, Othello's bride, who has been left under the care of the bold Iago, who, due to the high winds at sea, has arrived 1 week earlier than planned. Cassio now proceeds to urge great Jove or Jupiter, in even more flowery verse, to Othello guard and swell his sail with thine own powerful breath, that he may bless this bay with his tall ship, make love's quick pants in Desdemona's arms, give renewed fire to our extincted spirits, and bring all Cyprus comfort. It's at this point that Desdemona enters, accompanied by Iago, Emilia, and Roderigo. Cassio welcomes her in his customarily overly enthusiastic and chivalrous manner, as he urges all the men present to drop to their knees in front of her. Oh, behold, the riches of the ship is come on shore. You men of Cyprus, let her have your knees. Hail to thee, lady, and the grace of heaven, before, behind thee, and on every hand, enwheel thee round. Desdemona graciously accepts Cassio's flattery, but it's clear that this is mere politeness on her part, as she is preoccupied by her concerns for Othello's safety. I thank you, valiant Cassio. What tidings can you tell me of my lord? Cassio's reassurance that Othello is safe and should soon arrive does little, however, to soothe her fears. The dialogue is once more interrupted by a shout within of "A sail! A sail!" and "A shot is heard." This is also a gun salute, signifying that the ship contains friends rather than foes, and the second gentleman is once more dispatched to obtain news. Cassio now turns his attention to Iago and his wife Emilia, who also happens to be Desdemona's lady's maid. He asks Iago to excuse his somewhat elaborate and chivalrous greeting to his wife by saying that he can't help it, as it was the way he was brought up. Let it not gall your patience, good Iago, that I extend my manners. 'Tis my breeding that gives me this bold show of courtesy. He kisses Emilia. The contrast between Cassio and Iago couldn't be any starker. While Cassio comes across as being excessively chivalrous, Iago shows himself up for not having a chivalrous bone in his body. Once more demonstrating his misogyny, he rudely characterises his wife as a nag. Sir, would she give you so much of her lips as of her tongue she oft bestows on me, you would have enough. Desdemona, however, remarks on the fact that Emilia has remained silent in the face of such a character assassination. Alas, she has no speech. Iago, not deterred in the slightest, counters this by claiming that she carries on talking even when he's trying to fall asleep. In faith, too much, I find it still when I have list to sleep. That she is only quiet now because she is in front of her mistress, but that she is thinking her spiteful thoughts rather than saying them. Marry, before your ladyship, I grant she puts her tongue a little in her heart and chides with thinking. Emilia merely responds to this with the mild, "You've little cause to say so." This is sufficient to provoke a blistering attack from Iago on women in general, in which he accuses them of being duplicitous, as they give a false impression of their meekness when they're in public, and that it's a totally different story behind closed doors. Come on, you are pictures out of doors, bells in your parlours, wildcats in your kitchens, saints in your injuries, devils being offended, players in your housewifery, and housewives in your beds. At the time, the word housewife would have been pronounced hussif, which is where we get the word hussy from, meaning a woman who was crude and offensive in a sexual way. Note how it doesn't take long for Iago, the antithesis of Cassio, to descend into vulgarity, and how his switching into prose from blank verse complements this. Neither lady is impressed by Iago's condemnation of an entire sex, with Desdemona denouncing him as a slanderer, and Emilia declaring that he shall not write my praise. In order to lighten the mood and while away the time until her own husband arrives, Desdemona challenges Iago. What wouldst thou write of me if thou shouldst praise me? Iago seems initially reluctant, warning her, "O gentle lady, do not put me to it, for I am nothing if not critical." Desdemona, however, insists in an aside, explaining that she is not merry, but I do beguile the thing I am by seeming otherwise. In other words, she's not feeling jolly, but she is pretending to be so that her true feelings remain hidden. There follows some lengthy wordplay in which Iago delivers a number of maxims which state what he believes to be general truths about women. Be they fair, meant as both blonde and beautiful in this context, black, meaning brunette and dark complexioned, foul, meaning ugly, wise, witty, meaning quick to understand, and foolish. All of them bear his hallmark cynicism that there is not a single woman who isn't a manipulator and a slut. Desdemona condemns him for his heavy ignorance and demands that he tell her what praise thou couldst bestow on a deserving woman indeed, one that in the authority of her merit did justly put on the vouch of very malice itself. In other words, what would he say about a woman who even the nastiest of people would have to admit was truly virtuous? Iago is equally condemnatory. A woman, he says, who is beautiful but not proud with it, one who can speak eloquently but is not loud with it, a woman who is rich but doesn't spend money on dressing extravagantly, one who can have whatever she wants and yet holds herself back, one who can wreak her revenge and yet prefers to turn the other cheek, one who is wise enough to do nothing foolish, one who can think but chooses to keep those thoughts to herself, one who can see men pursuing her but refuses to look back. A woman such as this he dismisses as one who merely breeds foolish children and keeps a record of household expenses. Note how once more Iago uses words here that have a second meaning, which is crude. A cod's head and a tail were contemporary slang for male and female genitalia. Desdemona professes to be shocked and berates him for his most lame and impotent conclusion, complaining to Cassio that he is a most profane and liberal counsellor, or that he is coarse and unprincipled in sexual matters. Cassio merely responds, "He speaks home, madam. You may relish him more in the soldier than in the scholar." In other words, he speaks in a blunt manner which is better appreciated in him as a soldier than as a learned man. He takes Desdemona by the hand, presumably to offer her some comfort. Note how Iago, in an aside, seizes on this seemingly intimate, yet ultimately empty, courtly behaviour as the means by which he will ensnare as great a fly as Cassio. He mocks him for the foppish manners that mean he repeatedly kisses his own fingers, saying that if it is these that are responsible for stripping him out of his lieutenantry, or for losing his position, it basically serves him right. His evil plotting is brought to an abrupt halt by the sound of trumpets within, as Othello's arrival is finally announced. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments section below, and I'll do my best to answer them. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos on English language topics and exam techniques and English literature texts.